Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Nedarim, Daf Lamed Hey. Yo, you're gonna sit there and talk in the back the whole time, like we did yesterday, Stan? So we're starting at the very top of the Daf. Yesterday we learned the shita of Rabba. And we learned the shita of Rabba in regards to a case of hektish that was then given over as a matana. And there, 3 lines from the bottom on Lamed Dal and Lamed Beis, Rabba was of the opinion that the Yavalei b'matana aser, that if something was given over b'matana, that if hektish was given over b'matana, that it would be aser. And the Gemara at the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph asks a question against Rabba. Rabba again had said that the hektish that was given over as a matana is going to be aser for that person, als hektish. And here the Gemara asks as follows, the very top words of Lamed Hey Amud Aleph Esvei, we have a brisa that seems to go against the shita of Rabba. Amar lo, if a person says, Hashileni parascha, please lend me your cow, I'm going to use it to pull a plow, whatever it may be. And then in response, antagonistically, Amar lo, konam para shani kanu ilach. I make nope, I hereby make this hektish, you're not allowed to benefit from it. Nixi alecha, im yesh li para, elazu, and I'll make a neder against all my nechasim if I have any more than this one para. Or he says a similar story, Hashileni kardumcha, lend me your shovel or your hoe. And Amar lo, konem kardom sheyesh li shani kanui nixi alai. Shani kanui, and he makes a neder that if I have this, then you're not allowed to use it. And nixi alai im yeshli kardom elazeh, and if he makes a neder that there's going to be a neder status on this if I have more than one kardom. And then v'nimsa sheyesh, so and then we find in fact that he has more than one of either the para or the kardom. So then b'chayav aser. Meis o shenasna lo b'matana harei zemuter. Now this case has a lot of nuance in it. It's different phraseologies of what they're saying. They're all examples, but the highlight that we need from here is that if you have something that has a status of a konam on it and it's a matana, this brisa says it's a matana and it's mutter. However, the brisa we learned yesterday about Rava, not the brisa, but the statement of Rava that we learned yesterday is that something that's given over b'matana from hektish is going to be aser. So it's a kasha against Rava from a brisa. And the Gemara responds 8 lines down on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, don't worry, Amar Rav Acha b'rei Rav Ika shenisna lo al yedei acher. You would have been correct. It would have been aser, like Rava said, if it was given directly. But if it was given to one person, and then that second person gave it to you, so then that's al yedei acher, and that would then be mutter. So there's really no stira, and the din of Rava is right. That hektish that's given over directly from me to you, I was makdish it and I gave it to b'matana, then it would be aser for you, even though I gave it to b'matana. However, if I gave it to a person in between me and you took it from that middleman, so then that would be b'chay of mutter. And Meis or Shanasla b'matana would be b'chayav aser, but if it was a matana, then it would have been totally fine. So that's the end of it's really the end of yesterday's sugya. And now we're going to be starting with a bit of a lumdisha question. And the Gemara wants to know, Ba'minei Rava me Rav Nachman. Yesh me'ila bekonamos olo. Where does me'ila apply? By hektish. So what if I make a konam, I make a neder, this is going to be just like hektish. So what's that comparison? Is it that item is mamish hektish, and therefore me'ila applies? Or do we say, no, it's conceptually like hektish, just like hektish cannot be benefited from, so too over here? Which one, is it a full comparison, or is it only a conceptual comparison? So the Gemara says, Amar le tani tuha, we've already learned this. Where did we learn this? In our Mishnah from a couple of days ago. What does the Mishnah say? A third of the way down, we said, Makom shenod lenoleha schar tipol hana lehektish. Remember the sugya about Hashava Saveda. So the din is that if I find an item and there was an Isra Hana between me and you, so I'm allowed to give it back to you. And if you, as a normal function of your community, were to give a reward for a lost item, tipo lehektish, that it should be the extra money that I gained for having done my mitzvah, that has to go to hektish. And the Gemara says that the use of the word hektish here is very specific. Lememra ki hektish. It's trying to tell you that a konam is no different than a hektish mamish. Ma hektish yesh bo me'ila, af konamos yesh behen me'ila. And therefore, with the Gemara's conclusion at this point, it seems very clear that if a person says, Hare alai, this item ki hektish, that it's hektish mamish, and it's nothing else. It's not something that's just forbidden to you and you can throw it out to the Yam HaMelach. It's very specific language, and it means that it's hektish mamish, and they learned that from our Mishnah, where it teaches us that if a person were to get money in return for doing the mitzvah of Hashavas Saveda, but because you and I are mudar hana from one another, that money is nafal hektish. And it doesn't say nafal. We've seen this before, that we throw it into the yam, we throw it into the yam melach. We've seen these phrases before in Shas. None of that. It's hektish mamish, and therefore the comparison is a full comparison. And the Gemara says this shita actually exists in the Tanaim, although it is subject to a machlokes Tanaim. Halfway down Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, the Gemara says kit Tanaim. Konam, a person makes a neder. Kikar zu hektish va'achla. A person says, this piece of bread, this loaf of bread is hektish, and then I ate it. So what was my konam? It wasn't on me. It was on the item. Konam, what did he say? Kikar zu hektish. This piece of bread in front of me is considered hektish. And therefore, because it was on the chefza itself, on the item itself, therefore, bein hu vein chaveru ma'al. No matter what, that's mamish hektish, and that is me'ila. Lefichach yesh la pidyon, and because there's me'ila, there's also pidyon. We spoke about this a couple of days ago, but the point is that it can be podeh, the status can be podeh from one thing to another. What if he said, kikar zu alai lehektish, not just about the item, this item is forbidden to me in the frame of a hektish? That's different. The first one was on the chefza only. This item is hektish, and therefore, if I eat it or if you eat it, if anybody eats it, it's going to be problematic. But what if I limit myself, limit the hektish status of the bread only to myself? The loaf of bread in front of me is harei alai, is kikar zu alai lehektish ve'achla, then hu ma'al chaver lo ma'al. Then if I eat it, so then I did me'ila. But because it was more about the gavra, and I said it's on me, so therefore the Gemara says, lo ma'al, if you're a friend and you ate it, there was never an isser that it's not inherent in the food. It's not inherent in the granules of bread. What it is that I made a commitment on myself. I'm not going to eat food X. Instead of saying food X is an entity of hektish, it's I'm not going to eat that food. Those are different things. And lefichach.
He said konam and hektish. And you use both.
Konam, kikar zu hektish va'achla.
Okay, so he said konam and hek, like.
Konam just means he took a neder to say that this kikar is hektish, that this bread is hektish. That was case number one. And case number two is konam. Well, he doesn't say konam here, but it means it's still a neder. Kikar zu alai the hektish. So there are two cases brought in this brisa, and in this latter one, it was more focused on him. I will not eat that food. It's like New Year's resolutions, like I will not drink Coke. I never said that. I'm just saying this recording is hereby undone retroactively. I'm in the middle of a can of Coke right now. There's no chance. So the Gemara says that when I'm more specific on the Gavra side of things, that I limit myself, then of course there's going to be that limitation only on me and not on anybody else. Lefichach ein lepidyon, it's not me'ila, and therefore there's no possibilities for pidyon. Divrei Reb Meir, who's of the opinion that clearly yesh me'ila bekonamos, that a konam, that a neder, when you make a neder to say that this item is like hektish, it's mamish hektish. It doesn't have to be a korban to be hektish. I am making a commitment that this loaf of bread is no different than hektish mamish. Then comes the dissenting opinion 2/3 of the way down.
Sorry, so
no problem.
How's it if it's hektish itself? If he made it hektish for himself.
Yeah.
So only the base meat, but the other guy can be over me'ila.
He's not over me'ila. Because it's not inherently in the bread. It's only my relationship to that bread.
Was it still
it's alai. Harezu, hare alai.
But that loaf of bread, was it owned by?
Schizophrenic. I'm serious. Like it has two totally different realities. To me, that's kryptonite, and to you, it's just bread. As it relates to me, if I gave it over, it would count as hektish. As it relates to you, it's nothing. Correct. It only is in as much as it relates to you. What you're really saying is that you're not saying that I'm giving this to the Beis HaMikdash. You're saying this has a status of hektish, as does something in the Beis HaMikdash, and that status remains true for me if I say hare alai. Yeah. It's not harezu. Yeah, correct. Exactly. It's not. We're saying that it's an equivalent to an item that is hektish in the Beis HaMikdash, and it's a full equivalency as it relates to me. As it relates to my chaver, if you want to eat it, hamotzi lechem min aretz, like it's a very Gemara-y type. It's like a Jewish law thing where like there's a mitzias over here for me and not for you.
But you couldn't use that, let's say, to pay a debt to your friend, right?
I could not. If it was hare alai, right? It's hektish. Then I'm giving. And even though, but it would be an Isser Me'ila on me, that whatever that money's equivalent is, that would be my punishment in Me'ila. But you as the Chaver to receive that, no problem. You're none the wiser. It's Harei Alai. It was not.
So could you say Kol Kodim Zachar to this item?
It's not Hefker, it's Hektish.
So, but the thing is, that he's also the Hanan. So if he's also the Hanan, I would imagine he's Me'aishu.
No, but you could be poded, the Gemara says. Yes, yeah, you're allowed to be poded. There still is a dollar amount, which is, we didn't get into the pidyon piece. It's really a side sugya, but that's true, is that because there is a status of pidyon in regards to the me'ila, so it doesn't have a value of 0. It's not hefker mamish. It's still yours. And you could say, Harei alai kikar zu is hektish for 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be a forever comment. And I don't know, I probably stam it is, but but it doesn't have to be that way. And then the Chachamim come in and say, I disagree. Ben kach ben kach lo mo'al. If a person, yeah, lefichach ein la pidyon, is that because it's not actually hektish, even though I compared it to hektish. So the bread in front of me, when I make a statement of harei alai hektish, it's not really hektish. It only is usher to me as is hektish. That's not really me'ila, and therefore the Gemara says that ein la pidyon. The Chachamim argue and say ben kach lo mo'al. There is no me'ila here. If I take a piece of bread and I want to say, as it relates to me, or even if I say harei kikar zu hektish, it may be usher to you, als neder, but it's not hektish. And that's what the Chachamim say. That's against our Gemara, because our Gemara that we learned earlier, the answer that we saw of Tani Tuha, where we brought a raya from our Mishnah, where it said that makom, what's the line? Makom shenotlan aleh haschar tipol hano hektish. So the Chachamim would not agree with that. That's only al shitas Reb Meir. Only Reb Meir would say that because he holds yesh konamos b'me'ila, yesh me'ila b'konamos. Yeah, yesh me'ila b'konamos. The Chachamim don't agree, and lefisha ein me'ila b'konamos, and therefore there is a fundamental machlokes tanaim. Our Mishnah is like the shita of Reb Meir. And continuing with the shita of Reb Meir, 8 lines from the bottom, the Gemara says, Amrle Ravacha Bered Rav Avia the Rav Ashi, Ki kari alecha, my bread's usher to you. So then, unasana lo b'matana, mi ma'al. Oh, this is Gavaldik Shiloh. So I say, this loaf of bread right here is usher for you like hektish. And then I give it to you as a present. First of all, I'm not a nice person. A bad person. It's not nice. But the Gemara is not asking if you're a bad person. The Gemara is asking who, if anyone, violated Me'ila. Mima'al. Do we say lim'ol no saint, that the person who did the Me'ila was the giver? That can't be, because as it relates to him, halo asira alei. That piece of bread was a regular piece of bread. Because what did I say? Kikari alecha. My loaf of bread is only usher to you. But as it relates to me, I didn't do anything wrong. It's my piece of bread. I gave you a piece of bread and I put it in your property. I did nothing wrong. I'm a jerk, but I did nothing wrong because that piece of bread, as it relates to me, the transition from me to you is a nothing. So says the Gemara, maybe we should say limol mekabel. Maybe we should say the recipient is the person who violated me'ila. So the Gemara says, Yachol de Amar hetera ba'isi, isur lo ba'isi. He could argue, but don't give me something usher, make it my fault. Don't do that. I didn't ask you for something usher. In other words, you can't force me into a situation of me'ila by you ushering the item to me and then you putting the item in my property. That doesn't work. So therefore, the Gemara is stuck. The Gemara doesn't know who does the me'ila fall on, if at all. The Gemara concludes. This is, as I mentioned, this is within the shita of Reb Meir, who holds yesh me'ila bekonamos. So if I say kikari alecha, that's a konam for hektish. I say my piece of bread, as it relates to Stan, that's going to be hektish. So hold on 1 second. So when that happens, that bread is me'ila, but only for you. So when I take that and give it to you b'matana, I've done nothing wrong. The bread, as it relates to me, is mutter. I could eat it if I wanted to. So I can give it to whoever I want. And as it relates to you, the Gemara says, it's not fair that you should violate me either just because I gave it to you. I created the perfect storm. I said the bread is going to be hektish, and then I put it in your property. That's not fair to you either. So the Gemara is unclear if at all if there's going to be any me'il at all.
Isn't there a difference between if someone says kikari alecha and kikar zu alecha? As far as whether the Easter
well, the alecha piece makes it personal. Even if you say kikar zu, which typically is a cheftza language, but when you say it's alecha, you're speaking out of two sides of your mouth. Because that, you know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't work. I don't know that I'm right. I'm reacting to your question, but the alecha piece makes it that means that for me, it's still not a problem. it's probably the case that if you say, kikari or kikar zu, maybe the difference would be if it's hefker. If it's a hefker and I pick it up and I say kikar zu alecha.
I think the only difference is kikari is any wolf of yours. Kikar zu is that one of it. But
that could be.
Else,
Yeah, the alecha piece. What?
Hikari could be one wolf. Doesn't have to be all of them.
Could be. Yeah, it could be. Those could both be true. We'd have to see. We'd have to create a case and make it.
But ultimately, for this purpose, it's the same thing.
Correct, because of the alecha piece, right? So the Gemara responds in conclusion to this question. Let me just repeat the case one more time. I take a piece of bread and I make a konam that it's usher for you as it relates to hektish. I was makdish it in as much as you cannot benefit from it. The Gemara paskins Zamar le mekabel ma'al, that really you, the recipient, have violated it, but not when I put it in your property. Only l'chashiyotzi, only when you do something with it. Okay, says the Gemara, shekol hamotzi mo'os hektish lechulin kasavur shel chulin hu ma'al. Me'ila happens all the time, or primarily happens when you don't know that you did it. If you're doing it because you're guilty on purpose, intentionally, you're really a bad person. This me'ila b'derech klal is done b'shogeg af zem mo'el. You may not have even known. You may not have even known, and the me'ila actually took place. There are times when we do things and we don't even know that we violated anything. This would be a sample of that. And it probably still applies today. If I say right now, if I makdish something and then I use it, l'chor I'm chai me'ila when the Beis Hamikdash returns.
But so if you do take something, then all you have to do is replace the monetary value.
Plus a slap on the wrist. It's also, I think, plus chomesh, no? Yeah. So it's actually 25%. We call it chomesh.
So the Beis Hamikdash is treated as though it's something that you stole from somebody else.
You stole something from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, yeah.
Right.
I should say you stole something that was mukdash. And I guess you stole something that had a status of hektish, and that if you use it for your benefit, then you're chayav.
What I'm saying is that it's the same thing as if you took it from somebody else and then you realized it, and you still have to pay that bonus.
I don't know how it works. Ben Adam Lechavero in this. I don't know. Like I presume the money goes to the Beis Hamikdash. I'm just saying I presume that's the case, but it wasn't actually hektish. I don't know where the money goes. I don't know which pushkat goes in. Does it go into you took my inaccessible stuff, because it's not hektish mamish, right? It's not actually, it doesn't actually belong to the Beis Hamikdash because it wasn't hare kikar zu. It wasn't konam kikar zu.
It is me'ila.
I know, but the me'ila, it's true, but it never. I don't know. Maybe it did. I don't know. It's I don't know the answer to the question. I'm just.
Money go.
One possibility.
That is a possibility. For all cases of me'ila where there's a lack of clarity, please see text. So says the Gemara, Av Zemoel, in this case, the person who is a makabel would violate me'ila, not when it's put on his property, because that would be a jerk move by me to make something usher and put it in your property. But when you actually do something with it, you eat it, you benefit from it, you sell it, whatever you do, that's going to be me'ila.
So he just lets it there to rot, he's fine?
Yep, 100%. What'd you say?
According to Ram, possibly.
The what? Oh, I didn't even see that. I'm not so surprised to hear that because our Mishnah is a Stam Mishnah.
And the fact that Rava goes through the whole thing, but
right. Rava also seems to. Oh. Right, correct. Yeah, I don't know. To spend more time on that. That brings us to the next Mishnah on the top of Lamed Hey Amud Beis. We had spoken about things that we are allowed to do even when there's a status of Mudar Hana between me and you. We spoke about different things. We spoke about Hashavas Aveda, and this Mishnah is really a continuation of that Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? The Torah mes trumaso, I can give truma on your behalf. Asrosav, I'm allowed to give your maestros, ledaito, even though you know about it. Makri valav, I'm allowed to bring korbanos of kine zavin, kine zavos, kine yoldos, chatos v'ashamos. Seemingly very specific set of korbanos of birds that are given for mechusari kapara. Mechusari kapara are people who had to go through a waiting period of tahara to get to become tahor, and the final makeh b'patish that actually makes them tahor is hakravas hakorbanos. So, and we'll see soon if my language is correct about mechusari kapara, but these birds are often given by mechusari kapara, and as well umalamdo medrash halachos ve'agados. I'm also, if let's say you're mudar hana for me, I can still teach you Torah. but not all Torah. Avalo yilamdenu mikra. We're not going to learn today about this, but we'll learn about it in the subsequent days. But you're not allowed to learn psukim and chumash from me. You can learn Gemara. You can come to Daf Yomi shiur, but you can't come to a chumash shiur that if we're mudar hana from one another. Aval melamed hu esbana vesbenosav mikra. But the next generation, even though you're going to really appreciate the fact that I'm teaching your children, says the Gemara, it doesn't matter, that it is perfectly permissible to teach them even mikra. What? Banavuv nosav, mikra. Oh, you're being medayik. It's not even the diuk. Banavuv nosav. So women have a chiyuv of learning mikra. It's not a diuk. It's just he's just reading the book. There is a discussion in the Farshim about.
Or you could just say clearly.
Yeah, that was where my head was there, but I didn't want to say. I work for the OU. It's very complicated. What? What'd you say?
Many versions. Presumably, the issue of whether it's often what each one's done is Torah.
No, but that doesn't apply to Chumash. What? Yeah, who's the quote?
However, says the mission is a source of Rambam which means the teaching scripture to girls.
Okay.
Here, I assume it's because you have a mitzvah to teach your kids, so it's not just are they allowed to, but you have.
Yeah, I was about to make a comment on that we know that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, broadly speaking, applies to men, but that doesn't mean that a woman is exempt from knowing halacha that she has to keep. That's ridiculous. Of course, a woman has to learn halacha. So as one of my rabbeim used to say, okay, they don't have to finish us, but they have to finish Shulchan Aruch like 30, 40 times in their life. You know, you can complain all you want about Daf Yomi, that's fine. But to tell me that a woman doesn't need to know halacha like the back of her hand, of course she does. And maybe she won't learn Shachs and Tazes, but learn all the halachic compendiums that go through all of Hilchos Kitchen and all of Hilchos Nida and all of Hilchos covering your hair and whatever. You gotta know it cold. Shabbos. You gotta know it cold. You got to know it cold. So for all of the dialogue that people say, mitzvah, you can call it whatever you want. But the requirement for a woman to know halacha is no different than the requirement for the halachic requirement for a man to know halacha. You have to know what to do. How do you keep halacha if you don't know halacha?
But it also only says mikvah. It doesn't say anything else. It doesn't say anything about halacha or what is it?
It's true. It's true. You're saying good. And maybe they don't learn it inside. I don't know. That could be part of the halachic shaila of Talmud Torah by women. It could be. And maybe they only learn the compendiums. Maybe they only hear it as, I don't know. I have to, but I'm glad you raised it, Rabbi Yaakov. I didn't even think much about it. Ibayalahu. We're going to come back to our Mishnah in a moment, but we have a broad question here about Kohanim. Hani Kohane. When we have Kohanim who are doing the service in the Beis HaMikdash, are they shluchei didan havu? Are they our shluchim? I need to bring a korban. I've done something wrong. Here's my korban chatas. Please bring it on my behalf. Oh, or perhaps are they shluchei d'shmaya? L'may nafkamina. What would be the difference between a kohen who is a shliach of me or a kohen who is a shliach of a Kodesh Baruch Hu? The Gemara says lemudar hana. What if there is an isser of hana that the kohen says I will get? I say about a kohen, I'll get no hana from kohen X. And then that day, Kohen X is on his mishmar. I'm like, shoot, I brought my korban chatas, and he's the one who's supposed to do the shechita. So that's the nafkamina. If you want to say that the Kohen is really just an extension of my hand, then hamahani levaser. Then he is enabling me to bring a korban chatas. That's a real hana, and that should be forbidden. But if you say, no, the Kohen, okay, he's the executioner, but Lamaisa, he's not my shliach, he's a Kodesh Baruch Hu shliach to make sure the chatas is brought, so then, shari. So that would be a huge nafkamina, especially considering what we're talking about. The whole parak is called Ein Bein Mudar, and the Maseches is called Nedarim. So if you are Mudar Hana from a Kohen, can he bring your korban, yes or no? Well, that depends. If Kohanim are shluchim didan or shluchim d'shmaya. And the Gemara says, what then is the halacha? And the Gemara tries to bring a raya from our Mishnah. Tashma ditnan makre v'lav kine zavin v'chule. We spoke about all of the korbanos in our Mishnah. Iyar meshluchei didan kamahanile. It has to be that it's shluchei d'shmaya. It has to be the kohanim are shluchei d'shmaya, because otherwise, these animals that it seems like these are very specific animals that are being brought kamahanile. Says the Gemara, that very argument that you're giving, that there are specific animals mentioned in the Mishnah, is itself a raya for something else. Listening makre v'lav korbanos. Why did the Mishnah specify any korbanos? Why did it specify any korbanos at all? Ella, it must be, what's the common thread of all of the korbanos in the Mishnah at the top of the page? Ella, they're mechusare kapara shaim. By mechusare kapara, our Mishnah is actually saying lav dafka that it's shluchei d'shmaya. They could even be shluchei didan, and these can still be brought. There's no raya that it's shluchei d'shmaya. Why not? Because Damar Rav Nachman hakol tzrichin das chutz mechusare kapara. When the korbanos of mechusare kapara are brought, the person doesn't even need to know that they're being brought. They just need to be brought. And therefore, we don't care who the Kohen is. So it's not a raya that it's that Kohanim are shluchei d'shmaya. It very well could be that they're shluchei didan. And the reason why our Mishnah is proving that is because it gave examples of animals that are only mechusare kapara, which specifically don't require das bailam. Beautiful raya. And how do we know that this is true? We know that a person can bring korbanos for their sons and daughters. What do we learn from the language of zos toras hazav? Bein gadol, bein katan. So that's also a case where there's no das required. A katan doesn't have das. So if I'm bringing a korban for them, so too there are korbanos such as ones that are brought from mechusare kapara that don't require das. And the raya stands. So far, the raya stands that our Mishnah is likely talking about, likely hinting to the fact that Kohanim are shluchei didan, there are shluchim, and lav dafka that they're shluchei d'shmaya. The Gemara doesn't entertain the possibility that it's both, because shlichus is one-track mind. You got to pick something. You got to be able to be dedicated to the mishaleach. And right now, according to the Gemara, we are the mishaleach, and they are the shluchim. Says the Gemara, we have a problem with Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan was the one who said that the pasuk of Zos Toras Hazav implies Ben Gadol, Ben Katan. Elamayata Rav Yochanan, who learned Zos Toras, that language is to teach us about a Katan and a Gadol, says the Gemara, what about Zos Toras Hayoledes, Ben Katana, Uvein Gedola? How can you say that Zos Toras Hayoledes is both talking about a Katana and a Gedola? A Katana, says the Gemara, Katana Bas Ledahi. We know that a Katana is not a Bas Leda. How can you want to tell me that a Katan needs a korban brought for other reasons, no problem. But a korban that's specific to a Yoledes, she's not a Yoledes. She's not a Yoledes till she's roi to be a Yoledes. And we've already learned this a number of times in Shas. This was the birth control of old, that they would take some type of cloth and insert it into the woman's body, and then after by the completion of Tashmish Amita, this cloth would absorb whatever zera is there, preventing, probably not the most effective form of birth control, but preventing the possibility of getting pregnant. And who are the people who are Meshamshos b'moch? Ketana u'beres u'minika. And we learned in all three cases why this is true. Ketana, says the Gemara, Shematis aber v'tamus. The Gemara doesn't continue, but we spoke about the fact that the me'uberes is Shemayas ubra sandal, that the ubra will get crushed, and the meinekes, her milk may dry up, and her baby will die from having no food. Different world now, because we have some formulas of things, but the Gemara is bothered by the fact that the Zos, what? Sometimes, right? I don't know what we're holding anymore. I don't know. What? Still a problem. Okay. So the Gemara says that it can't be that Rav Yochanan's drush of Zos Toras Hazav was talking about Ben Gadol Ben Katan, because if when we see the language of Zos Toras Hazav is Ben Gadol Ben Katan, so then why is it then when we see Zos Toras Hayoledes it's also Ben Gadol Ben Katan? But that makes no sense. She's a Ketana. A Ketana is not Roi Lele. It says the Gemara, Hahi Zos Toras Hayoledes. When it comes to the language of Zos Toras by the world of Yoledes, yes, we're supposed to make a drasha similar to Rav Yochanan's, but not the one that's Ben Gadol Ben Katan, but rather Ben Pikachas Ben Shota, between a wife who is a Pikacha, she's a regular wife, and a wife who's a Shota, who does not have her mental faculties with her. Shekinah maybe korban al ishto Shota, Kediri Rabbi Yehuda. A husband is allowed to bring a korban for his wife, even if she's mentally incapacitated. He's still allowed to bring a korban for Tanya, the Brisa writes. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Adam Mevi Korban Ashir Al Ishto V'chol Korbanos Shechayeves Shekach Kasuvla. This is what it says in her Ksuba. Ve'achrayos Islach Alai min Kadamastina, from the beginning of the judgment, from the beginning of the time of our contract. When we got married, I married you as a normal woman. You're now not a normal woman. I'm still obligated, just as I was on day one of our marriage, as I am in year 20. I'm obligated to take care of you and even bring your korbanos. So we're going to learn just two more questions and then we'll stop. We're going to be stopping at the 2 dots a quarter of the way down, about a quarter of the way down on Lamed Vav. So right now at the top of Lamed Vav Medalef, let's continue. Masiv Rav Simi Bar Abba, Im Haya Kohen, if there was a Kohen and the Mefaresh adds in the key word hamadir, where there was an isser of hana from one another, still yizrok alav dam chataso v'dam hashamo. The Kohen is allowed to sprinkle on behalf of me, even though I was madir hana from him. Doesn't matter. He can still be zorek the dam chatas and the dam asham. And the Gemara over here highlights. You can see the Mefaresh katani stam on the top line. Dibur hamaschal yizrok. He says katani stam. When our Mishnah says that he can be zorek the dam chatas and the dam asham, that's stam. Demashma kol chatos v'ashamos ve'afal gav delad mechusar kaparin inhu. There are other cases in the world of a chatas and of an asham that are not mechusar kapara. Let's say I do an isser b'shogeg. A regular isser b'shogeg. I'm not mechusar kapara. I'm not a yoledes. I'm not a zav. I'm not a zava. I'm nothing. I'm not a mitzora. I just did a chatas. And I bring the chatas over to the Kohen. I realize it's the Kohen that I was madir hana from. And the Mishnah says, the Brisa says that he can be zorek my dam. And it's clearly not mechusar kapara. So what does that show you? It must be that they're not shluchei didan. It must be that they're shluchei deshmaya. It has to be. Because if he's allowed to bring my korban when it's not mechusar kapara, can't be shluchei didan, because then it would be an isser hana. So it must be shluchei deshmaya. Says the Gemara, no, I'm going to make a new kimta. When that brisa that Rav Simi brought said that they're yizrak alav dam chataso v'dam hashamo, dam chataso shel mitzora, v'dam hashamo shel mitzora. The chsiv, as the pasuk says, zos tiyeh Torah sa mitzora, ben gadol ben katan. And that's the end of that question. And we tried to undermine our standing assumption that kohanim are shluchei didan. Let's try one more question and one more rejection of a question. It's not hakohanim shepiglu b'mikdash. We know that pigul is when the person doing the shechita has a machsheves pigul, which is that the food will be shechted for the sake of something shelo bizmano, shelo b'makomo. That's what pigul is. So let's say a kohanim did this. He was shepiglu b'mikdash. If he was mezidin, he's chayavin. If he did so hashogegin paturin, if it was an accident, he's going to be patur. Now, even though if he did it by accident, he's going to be patur, ela shepigul and pigul. His financial burden is one question, but the mitzias of the meat doesn't matter. The meat is tainted. It doesn't matter. It's going to be pigul. Now, let's analyze. If you want to say that the shlichus is that the Kohen is a shliach of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, so then hainu shepigul and pigul. Then I can understand why even b'shogeg, pigul and pigul, I understand that. If you're going to tell me that a Kohen is really a shliach didan, amai pigul and pigul, why would the machshava of that Kohen ruin this food? After all, lema, I, as the mishaleach, can say that's not fair. Lema le shlicha shivisich liskune. I hired you to be my shliach to do good things. V'lo le'avuse. You can't make my item into pigul. You're outside of your realms of shlichus. So if we say shluchei didan is going to be, if we say kohanim are shluchei didan, then he should have given this argument v'lo le'avasi. But therefore, we see that he didn't give that argument, so it must be that kohanim are shluchei deshmaya. So let's see what the Gemara responds. Amrei says the Gemara, you cannot bring a raya from the world of pigul because shayni gabe pigul. The rule is different from pigul because no matter what the case is, his machshava will ruin it. The Amar Kra lo yechashev lo mikol makom. That no matter what, it's going to be considered pigul, no raya, and therefore the Gemara concludes that kohanim are shluchei didan. That a kohen is really our messenger, much as they are on a higher level than most of us are in regards to their status, but they are the ones who do the work for us. We'll stop right here. Tomorrow I am recording and posting throughout the morning, Mir Hashem. I hope that's true. And then we'll pick up again Thursday night in person. Wishing you all a beautiful night.